What do a speaking coach, a strategy consultant, and a writer have in common? Sounds like the start of a bad joke, right? But honestly, it's all about finding out what people really do in their jobs. The stories, the struggles, the coffee breaks. The real stuff you won't find in a job title.
Welcome to a space where we sit down with people from all kinds of careers, have a laugh, and dive into what makes their work meaningful. Whether you're looking to learn something new or just here for a good story, let us be your guide. I'm Jeff.
And I'm Charlie.
And let's get casually
bro! So today we're here with an incredible guest, Alex Detmering. He is head of marketing for Sleuthkit Labs. He is the founder of the Prattle Foundation, and at heart, he's a writer who really takes interest in the human condition. Alex, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me, guys.
Absolutely. So, just to start, can you talk to us about what you're doing and why is it so cool?
Sure. So I'm doing two things. One, I'm the head of marketing for a tech company. I get to work with some brilliant people. The CEO of that company is actually kind of one of the founders of a branch of cybersecurity called digital forensics. So he's the modern version of digital forensics. He's a brilliant guy. Asks incredible questions. I find it to be like a huge privilege to work with him and learn a lot from him. So that's one of the things I do. The other thing I do is get a nonprofit off the ground. It's a passion project that I am going to turn into my career. And it's all about honestly exploring the human psyche, trying to help people by enabling people to share from, well, I'll just go out and say it, right? It's all about psychedelic therapy and the experiences people have there, what they learn, challenges, their own secrets and darkness, all that and more, and to share from that so that anyone who's listening can learn from it, hopefully see themselves in it and then grow as a consequence. So those are two things I do.
Wow, that's really amazing, Alex. When I read what you post on LinkedIn, I noticed the quality is really high. It's really good. And I didn't know that you were working as a marketer in your day job. So now I understand it a little bit more, but I found it very deep and very personal, very vulnerable. It's very pleasing to see. And if you're listening to it, I really advise you to go check on Alex LinkedIn. I would like to ask you a bit more about what is a psychedelics therapy? How does it work in practice?
That's a great question. So what psychedelics, I mean, starting with kind of defining terms, right? So what a psychedelic is kind of the subject of debate to some degree. The classic definition is psychedelic means mind manifesting. But most people put a few substances like in that category. It's LSD, psilocybin, which is the active ingredient or the psychedelic ingredient in mushrooms. LSD, psilocybin. What else? Why am I blanking on this? Oh, mescaline, DMT, which you may or may not have heard of, ayahuasca. All these things are kind of the most famous psychedelics, but there are other compounds that are related that do similar things, like MDMA and ketamine. All these things, how exactly they work has been being studied off and on by science because of the drug war off and on for the last, 7 decades or so. But still, kind of like how it all works is a work in progress from a scientific perspective. So what I'm saying here is mostly from, some science, some personal experience, some reading about other people's personal experience and hearing about other people's personal experience, but I don't want to make it anything definitive. Okay. So Psychedelics are, it seems to be things that allow you to perceive more than or differently than what you'd normally perceive. And that could be things within you, that could be things external to you, but that's pretty much what they seem to do. Psychedelic therapy is using those substances to see a lot of times within you, and to resolve thereby like issues that you may have in your life. So a big part of that is, much of what I'll just speak personally, because this is something I've used personally for many years, to make a lot of progress on a bunch of different issues. And honestly, we can talk about all that stuff, and I think you'd find it interesting. Um, but a big part of what happens, or what seems to mess people up in life, is just stuff in their mind or in their psyche, however you want to put it, that they haven't dealt with, that they either bury, ignore, suppress, whatever. Right. And psychedelics, being kind of drugs of awareness, they bring those things up. And then the therapeutic part of that is to do something with it, to process it. And processing is kind of like a little bit of a waffly term that I don't think people understand all the way, but I would just say more or less look at it and accept it. Right. So a specific example would be maybe something that's causing you a lot of trouble in life is the fact that when you were a kid, you were abused in some way. Maybe your dad hit you. Maybe when you went to school, the kids are really, really mean. Right. And when you're a kid, right, that kind of damage is not something that you can like understand. So because you can't understand it, it kind of sticks around with you, right? It's not integrated into your life or your mind. It's just a piece of information that you haven't done anything with, right? And so later on in life, that quote unquote, that's kind of what trauma seems to be, right? That can show up and kind of cause havoc in your life, right? Because it's an aspect of you that's not part of who you consciously think of yourself as. And so it's like pushing into your mind a little bit, right? It's this thing that's there, but it's not there. And so you're acting around it or through it or with it for all these reasons, right? And that's kind of what it means to have mental illness in a lot of ways, right? For there to be a part of you that's like there, but you're not really able to understand or use it. It's not really a conscious part of you. So it's like affecting your life, but you're not in control of it, right? So with psychedelic therapy, one of the things you can do, and this is like a vast oversimplification because it's not a simple topic, it's a very complicated topic. One thing you can do, right, is you can use them to become aware of that as an adult. When you can kind of understand that, you can be aware of that time when your dad hit you, or the time in school when the kids are making fun of you, and you can look at it from the perspective of an adult, and then you can finally understand what it is, what it was, and what it meant. And you can like have that now as a conscious part of who you are versus as like an unconscious influence in your life. So that's kind of a summary of it.
That is absolutely fascinating because we're delving into some super deep topics, but I think the overarching theme here, right, is our ability to perceive our own experience and our own kind of the mental implications of those experiences, right?
Yeah.
Um, I'm a guy who uh tries to practice introspection as much as I can, especially when it comes to, figuring out how am I going to handle a specific situation, or how am I going to maneuver around specific blockers that I already know I have. But that is something that requires an intense amount of dedication, education, and skill to work around into. And I think not a lot of people put, or at least I guess historically, have put a lot of value into that up until recently, right? And so, kind of to maneuver around that, you're saying that there is a lot of value in psychedelics to
Yeah.
kind of unearth all of that at a level at which you don't have to practice years of meditation
Yeah,
to
yeah,
get into.
potentially, right? For sure. I mean, I'll just say, specifically for me, right? One of the things that happened to me was that there was my introduction to psychedelics as therapy, truly my introduction to psychedelics therapy was kind of a wild and a rough one. So I had this an experience with psilocybin. It was actually just a bag of mushrooms, to be honest with you. I can make it sound medical if you want, but I had this experience with psilocybin. My intention was spiritual. I came from a spiritual background, guys. Like, I really was just kind of fascinated with like big questions and all that kind of stuff. Maybe that's religious trauma. Maybe that's just the way I'm cut. Who knows? Probably a mix, right? But I was always fascinated with these big questions, and I ended up not being like formally religious anymore, but I still had the questions. So I kind of stumbled upon psychedelics at the same time and saw them as a means of exploring these questions directly, right? Because the experiences are, by all intents and purposes, spiritual. And so I took one of these times. I was kind of intending to learn something about the secrets of the universe, at least in my mind. And I took some mushrooms, and what I got confronted with was a repressed memory that I did not know how to deal with. Right? It was a painful memory. It was a confusing memory, and I kind of ran from it. And and so what I'm referring to there is really kind of a case study in what I'm talking about with like becoming aware of something that was kind of part of your life and influencing the decisions that I was making in my life, but I wasn't like aware that it was even there, because like my conscious mind, it seems, I don't know, my conscious mind, it seems like felt that for many years, for several years, I couldn't like, I couldn't deal with that memory, right? Like I wasn't to be trusted with kind of like some of the contents of my own life. So they just like pushed it down, right? Then it popped back up, and I did truly freak out. So there was logic to, part of what my mind was doing there, right? I ran away from it for quite some time. It actually caused me to manifest what had been latent, like OCD in myself, and it caused a lot of chaos in my life. But all that is true. But what it also forced me to do was to confront this stuff, because running wasn't working. And so I kind of came to the conclusion, like, look, these things open up the door. Maybe they can help me walk through the door. And so I started doing psychedelic therapy. I worked with a therapist. They guided me through some sessions, and I kept on doing it over the course of years. And over the course of years, I started to learn the psychological skills that I needed to be able to, one, process that painful memory, understand what it was, incorporate it into my life, but two, like all of that stuff, which was kind of internal work, right, completely changed how I was able to operate externally. Like the fact that I couldn't deal with something painful and confusing inside me wasn't just like a thing that was true inside me. It was also true in the world. Like there were a lot of things in life, especially the things that I cared about most, that I just avoided doing. Right. And over a course of years of learning how to work through these things inside me, then I developed these like psychological skills. One of them is like the tolerance of the feeling of uncertainty. Right. One of them was the ability to move through emotions instead of getting stuck behind really tough emotions. So I developed all these skills, and then that really changed my life. So there was a level of like, this is like helping. I processed the thing inside of me largely. And then I was able to like take that and just like, boom, like that really changed everything about what I thought I could do in the world.
Wow, thanks you for sharing this, Alex. The process that you're talking about reminds me the process that I had with shyness and social
Yeah.
anxiety. So in this case, I didn't get the awareness by taking psychedelics. It happened without. But for a long while, I, instead of being aware of it as it is, I kind of did around it. So the funny thing is that I became a freelance developer when I was very young, and one of the reasons was because I could avoid social contacts by working from home. This was a kind of making my life around it. And but the way I framed it wasn't I'm shy of others. It was more like, oh, they are not interesting. They are mean, or not necessarily mean, but just not interesting, I would say. And one day
Yeah.
I got the awareness that it was coming from me. And this awareness allowed me to develop the skills to overcome this shyness.
Hmm.
So to get with the process of doing something about it. But this could only be done after I clearly saw what it is and all the lies that I put on it. So the way you're talking about all those stuff is that psychedelics can bring you awareness that you might not have normally. But of course, I imagine that it doesn't get much further than that. Once you have the awareness, there is something that needs to be done. So most likely it starts with acceptance. But for
Yeah.
something that's really, at some point, if you want to make your life better, you realize that you need to change something, then something have to be made. So I wonder if in the process of a psychedelics therapy, if there is also help to do all the stuff that comes after the the moment where you have this awareness moment.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, this is excellent question, and your story and my story, very very similar, man. In kind of the core pieces, I think so. Just to be clear, right? Uh, I'm not a I'm not a psychedelic therapy advocate. I think it's amazing, and I think people should consider it. But I also think that it's dangerous and comes with its risks. Like anything meaningful in life, right? There's no gain without an equal portion of risk. And so, if you hear my own story, right? Like I went through quite a process. Those years when I was dealing with all this stuff, when I didn't know how to work through the stuff inside of me, were years that I would equate to about as, they're the worst years of my life and were essentially hell. So I just want to make that clear, because I think someone can hear things that sound really good about stuff, about a medicine or treatment or whatever it may be, and then they can try it and be hugely disappointed or confused when it doesn't when the expectations aren't matched. That's not to say that these things aren't incredible, but I also want to kind of make it clear that they have their risks, right? To your point about the other part, right? Well, psychedelics you can both become aware of something and process, like do some of the thing itself in the experience. So a big part of the thing itself is not just like I become aware of the fact that I've got this pain inside me, or I'm really sad about this thing or whatever, and then doing something. Part of it is like, well, now I can learn in the experience how to feel my feelings, or be courageous, or whatever it may be. There's actually skills that you can learn within an experience. That said, your intuition, I think, is really right, Jeff, that you have to take everything that you've learned then and you have to do it. And that's a different kind of hard and an extremely long kind of hard. Like the longest psychedelic experience in the world lasts unless you get like stuck in one, lasts a couple days, right? Like 48 hours most. It's like Ibogaine. But to integrate, like in my own story, right, to take the things that I had learned and then like actually change my life with them, my guys, that was like minute by minute practice that unfolded over years. I mean, just so much practice, because OCD is a hell of a thing, and to train your mind, I mean, it just wraps the world in fear, and keeps you from being able to, and then you're just constantly like kind of veering away, turning away, getting lost in thought, and to like change that deep-seated behavior is to like change like millions of algorithms, algorithm by algorithm across years. And that's what I had to do. It was like my mind kept turning. I was like, nope, 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 nope. Feel the pain, don't run from the pain. Feel the fear, don't run from the fear. Like, look at this, don't run away from it. Over and over and over and over. And that builds that muscle. And that's the change that you're talking about, Jeff. That's like, that's a huge part of the work. And I think one of the things that happens with people, and I'm no different than this, is that we can confuse an experience, which is great, for a change, which is still to come. And there's just so much work to create that change.
You know, that's a really fascinating distinction, because I think so many people would equate, you know, the actual experience to, okay, that's going to be the thing that changes me. But the reality
Yeah.
is it's tough work, right? I mean,
Yeah.
you know, you can't just wake up after a massive experience and be a different person. I think it's much more complex than that. And it really, you know, takes away from the value of the amount of work that someone has to do to go through change, even if it is possible. Um,
Yep.
but you know, switching tracks here a little bit, I want to talk a little bit about the actual experience of you putting together the Parable Foundation, because it is a fascinating exploration, not just for yourself, because you know you have gone through this process, but
Yeah.
maybe to witness the experience of other people. What kind of gave you the idea to take this more journalistic approach to, you know, psychotherapy?
That's an excellent question, Charles. So all right, here's my big theory spiel, guys. Tell me if you like it. Um, uh, you know, our culture has everyone's gotten a lot better at talking about trauma and mental illness, and I think that's super awesome, and I think it's a big leap forward. Um, but that said, I think the trauma that we're allowed to talk about as a culture is largely the trauma of things that have been done to us, right? That's amazing, and I'm really glad this is it's healing, right, and therapeutic that we're having these conversations. That said, there's a whole other category of trauma, a category of psychological material that there is really no forum to talk about, and that's kind of like the trauma of what we might be, what we might have done, right? What we could have thought, said, all these kinds of things, right? The trauma of like the reality of ourselves. That whole category of things, like you can't really discuss that, especially in the most compelling formats like audio video formats, without it being more or less reputational suicide, right? So, and that's a shame. That's a shame, because to me, so much of the most important things for us to work through to grow in life is to learn how to understand and accept that kind of trauma, to learn how to understand and accept within ourselves our personal darkness, right? And the things that we've done, the things that we've said, whatever it may be, that don't align with the brand that we've created and traded with other people, right? And so psychedelics are a great means of becoming aware of that. What I was hoping to do, and what I want to do to help, what the Parable Foundation is about, is helping people by giving people a platform to honestly talk about those kinds of things and more, right? To honestly share, not only like, hey, you know, I had this experience, I learned a lot about how I could be a better person, or like I have had this peak experience with God, or whatever it may be, right? Those things are all awesome and they have their place. But a big part of what we wanted to make sure that we could communicate with the Parable Foundation was to have a platform where someone could come there and say, hey, I had this experience and I realized I could be abusive in some of my relationships. I realized that when I was 5 years old, I actually like pushed a kid down a hill, and I think he might have broken his leg, and then I kind of ran away, right? These kinds of personal moral injuries, right? that all of us, I think, have in our lives, all of us suffer from internally. But if we don't trade our war stories, right, then we kind of we're imprisoned by them, you know, and those become a source of mental illness and a source of constant pain, and that's a tragedy, right? Because it's a failure to understand what it is to really be a human, and we're all poorer as a result. And so I want to, that's what I want to do with Parable Foundation. I want to give people the opportunity to share from their experience as honestly as humanly possible, as much as they feel like they can, so that people listening can find themselves in those stories, can feel heard, seen, connect to other people's through that, like, hearing. And then if the person that they've heard, they're listening to, has like taken a step beyond where they've ever gone, then all of a sudden the thing that looked like a wall to them in their own like life, in their own mind, is now a door. Like, there is a hope for me moving beyond this thing, right? There's hope for acceptance, there's hope for love, there's hope for another life. And so we're starting the initial audience for this is people in psychedelic therapy and people interested in psychedelic therapy, because those are people that are getting faced with this stuff, right? And those are people that will that I hope can be helped by these stories, stories of, you know, the inner lives of others that they can hopefully relate to, and then grow through, right? But I think that I think this is a general human thing, a huge human thing. And I think that, you know, it's a big place for where I feel like society can grow. And that's kind of like a bigger woo, I don't know, idea, but it's something that really inspires me.
I really wonder how it works behind, because you said that people can share their stories. Do you have some anonymity in place? Do you have people can read and discuss and say, hey, I have a similar story, or something like that?
Exactly. So the means, right? The mechanism, it's anonymity. And so we've got a couple layers of anonymity. One is, you know, just change the name, change key details, that kind of stuff, right? And then like there's the next level of anonymity where we change their voice with AI so that someone can't even recognize who they're listening to, even if they did know them,
So you
right?
speak, you share
Yeah.
by speaking. Oh, interesting. Oh
Yeah,
yeah.
it's yeah, sorry. Yeah, I didn't really make that clear, and I'm sure people listening would be like really confused. I'm like acting like people actually know what the heck I'm doing. Sorry. So the Parable Foundation is the platform. It's a nonprofit, but the main thing that we do is we have a podcast, and on that podcast, which is anonymous, unless people really want to share their names, right? On that platform, which is anonymous, people can share freely these kinds of stories, right? These are the stories that we share.
In terms of, I guess, the value that you're bringing up front, it's the ability to not just recognize past behavior, or I guess past traumas, past experiences, but also allowing yourself the introspection to say, okay, maybe I'm not the best version of myself that I can be right now because of XYZ thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
You know, I deal a lot with the concept of authenticity, right? And so many
Mm-hmm.
people consider it being like, um, you know, I'm really interested in XYZ thing, and so I'll just only talk about that. Or, but the reality is, it's much more a skill based thought than that, right? For me,
Mm-hmm.
authenticity is about accepting things that might not be likable by someone else
Mm-hmm.
in every aspect of your life, right? You know, we got connected by Greg Schonenberg on LinkedIn. And, you know, I like Greg and I trust Greg, um, which is why I think this ended up being so great. But it's really, really easy to be incredibly fake on LinkedIn, um,
Yeah.
even trying to portray your authenticity, right? I think we all see stories about, you know, founders that are like, oh, here's how I lost $1 million in a month, kind of a deal. And you know what? Yeah, that's kind of a shitty thing to do, but ultimately it doesn't change how people look at you, maybe other than, maybe don't lose my $1 million if I give you some, um but it's much more difficult for them to say, okay, here's why I think I'm not reliable today. And it's
Yeah.
really hard to change that about me. So that's that, right? It's a much different contextual value that you put for one that's more like clickbaity, and then the other one that's okay, that's actually you. That's actually a
Yeah.
real kind of
The the
feeling
the
of change and
the
trauma.
the authenticity questions are a really interesting one, right? Because, and especially on professional platforms like LinkedIn, right? I wonder if what's going on here is that, like, the professional world is like renegotiating what is professional in real time, like right now. Like, we're kind of having this conversation right now, and people, I think some people probably going beyond what the new line is on LinkedIn. I think some people are like still kind of not quite there where the new line is, but there is a line that's being pushed. Well, I think well beyond where it once was before. I think a big part of that is out of necessity. I think, yeah, I think a lot of people are suffering, and I think we kind of have to change how we speak about our lives, even as professionals, to kind of thrive in a world where our professions have changed so much. We're no longer really connecting and working with people in a way that feels healthy, in the way that humans kind of were raised to the environments humans were kind of like raised to live in, right? Like, I work most of my life inside of my own bedroom because I work remotely, right? I'm missing some key things there that I think are important. And as a result, we kind of have to adapt, I would guess, like how we act, what professional dialogue is, to deal with the fact that, because I don't work with people all the time, I don't have the same kind of like feedback, right? There's not the same sense of camaraderie because I'm alone, right? And I'm doing things that aren't physical; they're very mental, and that has its own demands and its own stresses, right? And so I think that just means things need to change, and I think part of that change is just how we bring ourselves to work, how we talk about ourselves professionally, right? I think we kind of, maybe we just do need to be more open about our mental health. Maybe we just do need to be more open about our personal lives. I think there is a new line. I think there is a difference between a clear line. I mean, there's a line between personal and professional content, but I don't think the line between personal and professional content is now, or the same as it was back in maybe the middle of the 20th century, right? I think things have changed, and we're seeing what that looks like right now.
Oh yeah, I think we vastly underestimate the amount of suffering that's ongoing in the real world. To people who have life that looks okay from the outside, but who are periodically in deep suffering. And I think it
Yeah,
happens to everyone. And especially the contrast is even bigger on LinkedIn. It feels like on LinkedIn, everyone writes when they feel their peaks. You're at your peak, and so you write a post on LinkedIn. But all the other moments, you're normal or you're feeling bad. And it happens every once in a while that someone says like, oh, it's been 1 month that I didn't post anything because I was feeling so bad. And you see that it's people who are usually coaches, so they even have more willingness to show only their good sides.
yeah,
And it gives a completely biased opinion of what others and we all feel. And usually even when you know those people in real life, it takes sharing something about yourself, some personal struggle, before the other person open up. And I have a very easy example here. When I became a dad a bit more than 4 years ago, I had moments it was hell.
yeah,
And then I saw all those young parents posting everywhere how amazing it is. But when I met them in real life, same. Oh yeah, it's so great. It's so and but when I was on one-on-one, then they would admit that, oh yeah, sometimes I have those visions where I'm throwing the baby by the window, but I'm not crazy, right? So no, everyone has those feelings and
Mhm.
those visions and those moments where it's very, very difficult. But most people aren't aware of it.
Yeah.
So yeah, if we could share a little bit more about the reality, and as you said, all those people who are doing intellectual work, who have to be consistent, who have to deliver every day, who have to face deadlines, who are working sometimes alone. And man, I do it for 15 years, and I can tell you the first 7 years were pure hell. It was pure hell. I don't even know how I made through it. I don't even know. I was very young and I had so many problems and so many things to face. After 7 or 8 years, I started to figure things out a little bit. But even though that's 15 years, I still have my moments when everything is falling apart. Even with all this experience, with all this knowledge, it's way less, but it still exists every once in a while. So yeah,
Hmm.
we need to have people more aware of it, because if everyone speak only when they're high, we will have such a biased view of humankind. And
Yeah.
and also I think one of the other effects of this is that people tend to work, and the work that we do in most sectors, industries we are in, are made for people when they are in a good state. So, oh
Hmm.
yeah, it would be nice to have this, it would be nice to have that. But then when people are feeling very low, we have nothing. Nothing is made for people who are feeling low.
Hmm.
And there is a bias in society, but it's something that touches me deeply. And I also try to do my share to make it better.
Yeah,
I
man.
would like to ask you a question now, maybe something a bit more, how might I say, concrete. You told us about OCD, you told us about anxiety.
Yeah.
And I read on your LinkedIn, you talk a lot about intrusive thoughts and all those things that can be hard to deal with in daily life. Could you tell us a bit more about it, what it is, and maybe share some tips for people who have to deal with those things?
Yeah. 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 Sure. So, I thank you for the question. Thank you for the question. I can only I try to like write only from my experience, or talk about things only from my experience. So maybe it won't work for anybody else. Maybe my mind's just a unique mind. But that's what I'm just going to try to share from. Okay, so anyway, for anyone that's listening, just bear that in mind. So what's OCD like? Well, OCD is like the worst thing that you can imagine that could be true about you. That question being asked of you every minute of every day for years. That's what OCD is like. So, how did I get over OCD? Well, the trick is the technique that I found is not to fight with the fear or the question, um, but to feel the fear underneath the question. Because the question's valuable, even if it's painful. But you can't answer it through thought, really, or at least fully. The way to answer it is through experience, through experiencing the fear connected to the question and accepting that, and through moving through life and showing yourself through actual experiences that the fear doesn't need to be there anymore. Because what OCD, at least for me, what I feel like is trying to do is to protect me. And it's trying to protect me from destruction, right? What it sees as the worst thing that could happen to me. And it does this by wrapping the things where I feel most vulnerable in fear so that I dare not go there because the risk is destruction, right? Um, and so the only way to that I've learned to get through that is to, number one, to feel the feeling directly, which is part of what I'm afraid of, and number two, showing myself that I don't have to be so afraid by acting in a way that is contrary to what I fear, and then me, some part of me, seeing myself do that over and over and over and over and over and over and over again. And through that repetition in life, that part of me within that is so scared being a little less scared every time. So that's what it's like, man. And it's brutal. It's so brutal, man. It's so brutal. It's getting through it, getting over it. Now it's, I mean, I don't have no OCD, but I have much less now. But so it's like from 95%, 97% of my thought, my headspace being filled with this just like haze of pain and fear, and from that to being like sometimes is like nothing, sometimes is like 2 or 3%, sometimes a little intense, right? That's been the change, right? But to make that change happen is like kind of what I was talking to you guys about earlier. It's like a moment by moment mindfulness practice of like, no, I'm going to look at this thing I'm afraid of, right? I'm going to look at this thing in like a relationship that I have or something at work, right? That I'm afraid of being true. Maybe the results of this campaign, maybe they aren't going to pan out the way I want, right? Oh my God, like brings up all this fear, and then like just the fear just cycle, and it's so intense, right? And so what I have to keep on doing is the two things that I mentioned. I have to like feel the fear, put a little bit of my attention inside my body where that fear is, where I feel it, and then I got to go do or face the thing I'm afraid of, and just so many times, right? Just so many times, because it is a pathological level of fear. It's like crippling. It's insanely powerful. It's life altering, right? And then just you keep on doing it, right? And then it goes away.
But that's absolutely incredible. I have a really interesting relationship with fear because my household was always one of it doesn't matter if you're scared, do it. And I always internalized that and kind of made it into a logical premise of, okay, well, even if something is really good for me, but I don't want to do it, I'm going to do it anyways. But it manifested in such a strange way because of my contention with my surroundings.
Hmm.
I grew up half and half between Buffalo, New York, and Mexico City. And the thing is, in both of those places, I was really out of place, right? In Buffalo, I was the only Mexican that I knew. Um, and it came with a lot of kind of like pointing and jeering from my classmates. Um, you know, needless to say, it was a very kind of like racially tense place. So much so that my nickname growing up was a slur. And I knew it, but I never kind of um recognized how bad it was until I left. And in Mexico, I was the American kid because I had an American accent. Uh, and so, even if I look like them, And from the outside, I didn't talk like them. I didn't have the same experiences as them. So they always treated me as a separate level of person than they were. And I never had the opportunity to confront that kind of difference until I moved to New York. Because New York, for all its, negatives, the MTA, you'll never catch a train on time. There's trash everywhere, rats, right? For all of its downsides, the one cool thing about New York is you walk into, you know, any building, any public space, anything, as a person from any country, any religion, any nationality, any identity, really. And you're just one other person. It's a city of 8 million. So there will always be someone that matches maybe your look or your religion or, your nationality, something. It's not unusual for you to be different in New York. In fact, if you look like someone else, that's probably more of a red flag than if you look like no one else at all. And so it manifested in such an interesting way because I was, by all accounts, in my hometown, I think most people would consider me to be an asshole. And it's because every moment of my existence there was a fight or the potential to be a fight. And so I was afraid that if I didn't sneak in the first hit, I was going to be on the ground, both literally and metaphorically. But in New York, every time I expected something, I expected someone to say something, make a joke, uh, you know, come at me for whatever difference that we might have. They're like, "Oh, you're from Mexico. That's really cool." I have a friend that runs a thing down the street. You should meet him. Or, you know, oh, you came from Buffalo. I got a friend of mine from Syracuse. There was so much acceptance of difference here that I started being like, okay, I don't need to make a joke. I don't need to, slip in an insult here or there. I can redefine my relationship with other people. And it turned into kindness, and it turned into acceptance, and it turned into this whole different person of, I like getting people together instead of trying to fend them off. For me, the Parable Foundation gives such an important part because I think so many people like myself don't have the ability to kind of feel that somewhere, feel that openness, feel that recollection of, okay, it's not a fight. It's not a place to be feared. It's something that I can observe and reflect and contemplate in a sense of safety. And I think that's something that so many people forget, is that the most open you can be is when you're not afraid. And now that I'm thinking about it, I have a really funny anecdote. A guy I know, he's a very famous author, and he wrote a ton of really great books about kind of like team building and networking and things like that. But the first time I ever met him, we were at dinner, and he stood up and he said, "I hate small talk. So if you try to talk to me about the weather, I'm going to ask you to leave." And he went into a really deep and powerful conversation about how he was having a family problem, and it was a severe one. It wasn't something like, oh, my son doesn't talk to me. No, no, it's like someone I love is on the brink of homelessness, and I don't know if I should give them money because it might be enabling them. And everyone there was like starstruck. We were like, oh my God, I literally just met this guy 2 minutes ago. How are we having this level of conversation? And when I sat down and I thought about it, it's because, well, listen, even if we were to judge him and think, you're a horrible person for not helping your kid, whatever. The reality is he's a multi-millionaire kind of guy with a home in the Beverly Hills, uh, that can really live comfortably for the rest of his life if he wanted to. So who cares what we think? But I don't think the average person has that. Or
Hmm.
I should say, they didn't have that until they had something like your non-for-profit that allows them to have that sense of, I can tell a story about who I was and what I'm currently going through
Yep.
without fear of reprisal.
Yep. Exactly, man. I kind of what you said is really interesting, and it links to me with the conversation about vulnerability, and how to be vulnerable, and that's something that I write about personal stuff online, right? Just like Jeff, you mentioned, right? I write about personal stuff online. That's tough because you can manipulate people with personal stuff. You can manipulate yourself, but you can also manipulate others for pity or any number of things, right? So vulnerability is or transparency is so valuable, but at the same time, it's certainly a skill, and something that I've learned with like how to be vulnerable, and this is still very much a work and something I'm working on, right? Is just like I think most of the things that I've learned, a lot of it has to do with awareness, and particularly like awareness of like what where from an emotional standpoint, like this communication is coming from. I think when I'm doing something, when I'm saying something, even if it's embarrassing or like something personal, if it's coming from a feeling, a felt sense of strength, if I can like sense that within, like you can feel that, in your body, right? Then that's a good sign for me. If I'm feel into, like, what I mean by feel into is like you can just like focus on what you're feeling like in your body when you're saying something, right? And if I can feel into like the emotional motivation behind something that I'm saying, and it's kind of grabby, it feels like I'm trying to control, or like there's a felt sense of weakness to that, to whatever that communication is. And even if that communication is true, and even if that communication is vulnerable, it's not something I should say, or I try not to say it or write it, because I'm not being honest, even if it's the truth. I'm not being honest, even if I'm being vulnerable, because honesty, I think honesty is not about control. It's just about communication, you know? And if you can feel that you're trying to control someone with what you're saying, it's likely you're not being honest. I'm not going to say it's definitely true, but if you're feeling like you're just trying to communicate, right? If I'm saying something personal, but it's really just because it feels like the strong thing to do, then I can do it. Then it is honesty to me. So just a thought that about what vulnerability is. I think worth sharing.
Yeah. So it's interesting that you have this internal compass. I can relate in the fact that when I say something, sometimes, but I feel it after, unfortunately. So I say it, and then I'm like, no. And then I say, oh no, I shouldn't have said that, or that kind of stuff. Or it also happened to me that I just was talking things honestly, but then just after telling them, I felt like, oh, maybe that's not completely true, but I didn't know it at the moment I was telling it. So it's very interesting. And I also, same here as you. And I would add that usually, at least it's something that works well for me. If I'm showing vulnerability, there should be at least a little bit of resistance. If I don't feel that, oh, I would rather not say it, but okay, let's do it. I feel more authentic. If I hadn't any doubt about it,
Mm-hmm.
then maybe it's just it's not the same.
That's so interesting, and it's to me One of the side effects of like doing all this kind of mindfulnessy stuff that I had to do to work through a lot of my a lot of the OCD tendencies that I had, right, or those patterns, was just I spent a lot of time like just kind of like feeling these things, and like before I would say something, or just I just spent a lot of time just like focusing on how I felt about stuff, right? And what I started to notice, and I'm still not very, I'm okay at it. I'm just way better than I used to be, right? What I started to notice is like I think that kind of everything has these like little emotional signatures, and if you pay attention and you keep on practicing, you can kind of distinguish those emotional signatures apart, like in real time. There's other practices that you can do as part of it too, but and that's super cool. Like I think like your psyche or whatever it is has like these really sophisticated ways to like communicate to like, you know, the command deck, like, hey, this thing that about coming up, it's actually for this reason. And then you can like, if you develop the skills, you can kind of figure out, you can actually parse those messages while you're in the process of conveying messages. And that's super, like, it's super cool. And like I said, I'm still a super newbie at doing all this stuff. Right. But it's something that as I've learned to apply it, I feel it's made a huge difference in all my relationships. Just because, yeah, the more it's coming from the space that we're talking about of like just communication and not control, that's health, right? Because when I'm even if it sounds nice, if I'm like always like subtly trying, it's like I want to know, it's like the littlest things in words, you know, it's like the smallest, it's an inflection, all these little differences are either just like an open hand or like a grab. It's like an open hand or a grab. And like people that you know, people around you and you yourself, we all like feel that in interrelationally with people, and those like have they build interest, right? They either like are like creating debt or they're creating a deposit, and it's like just this wild thing, I think, with other people that if you're mindful of it, you can just really, it really helps you build healthy relationships.
You know, it's so funny that you mentioned that because it's so true on the communication level about communicating without control, because that is the highest level of communication that you can possibly have. And as someone who is like a communications enthusiast, most people don't understand that there's three levels, right? It's inbound, outbound, and facilitation, right?
Mm.
Inbound and outbound are very simple, right? It's like how easy can you send a message and how easy can you decode a message that's being sent to you. But facilitation is the ability to understand, witness, and move both sides of that kind of level of communication without like undue influence, right? Without the ability to force someone to talk about something or
Hmm.
give them a cue to talk about it. It's more subtlety of, okay, well, how do we approach XYZ area of topic or interest? And then hearing, you know, the group kind of getting together and speaking about it. There is mastery
Hmm.
in the ability to communicate without control. Um, you know, I guess in the course of really delving deep into this, because this is uh, a topic that maybe not a lot of people get into, or maybe even have the need to get into in their day-to-day lives. How have you kind of experienced the change of giving up control,
Cool.
especially when communicating?
Oh man, that's such a good question. Charles, that's such a good question. Oh, oh, dude. Okay, so I have to tell you a corresponding thing that's really, really important. Okay, about control for me personally, and I think a big reason why I would try to control, and I still try to control stuff, right? Not some kind of some kind of monk. Better though, right? Less control, less control. Uh, but a big reason why I was so obsessed with control was I was afraid. I was really afraid life was going to screw me. I was really, really afraid life was going to screw me. And I was afraid that if I didn't try to do everything I could in situations to kind of tip the scales in my favor, that the outcome was just going to be life was going to slam me, man. Right. And so, and so that was like an unconscious belief that I had. That was a really, really big reason why the OCD was there, right? Because OCD is about control and avoiding and guaranteeing certain outcomes. Like it was a big driver with a lot of things, right? To protect me from all this kind of stuff, So a big part of giving up control for me was letting go of that underlying belief. And I'll just say from my personal experience, gosh, beliefs like this, man, are so complicated and they're linked to so many things in your life, right? There's going to be, for me, it was an element that was probably linked to things that I had done, things that had happened to me when I was a kid, blah, 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 blah. There's like a whole list of things that are like the mega reasons why, like all these like sets of evidences and memories and such behind these things. But as I worked through those bit by bit, my grip on this belief that life was going to screw me loosened up. And that was really important because that meant I felt a little safer that maybe instead of like trying to screw me, things were just going to be generally, so. Generally, if things are generally so, then you're a little more, then I feel a little more comfortable kind of letting the what's the word? The chips fall where they may, right? Because at least they're not weighted against me, right? So that was a big part of it. And so there was like kind of individual psychology things, but then there was just like the practice of continually facing my own fears. And Jeff, I wonder if you faced a similar thing here. Like as you continually face your own fears with stuff, and that had to do a lot with just like, stepping into things in my job, stepping into things in my relationship with people in different ways, and consciously doing that, right? Where I'm like, oh, I recognize that I'm scared of it. And then I do that. And what's going on when you're scared of something is like, it's postulating a worst case scenario about what happens if you do that. Right. But if you like then do that thing, then that fear has a little less gas in it the next time. Right. And then and then you're like, oh, okay. And then that is control, relaxes. And then you start to gain awareness through this practice too of what's happening. And then you start to be able to speak more freely and act more freely as a result, because you have more trust. Just have more trust. Because you trust in life a little more, you trust yourself a little more, you trust other people a little more. You see that you're stronger than you thought you were. You see that life is not as evil as you thought it was. And so you don't have to control as much, or try to control as much, because you don't really control, but you try.
Wow. Oh yeah. Also, so that this is something that resonates deeply, because fear is really what would define, I'd say, the past 8 years of my life that led to a huge transformation. So it also defined what's before, because before I was defined by fear in the sense that I would avoid doing things that I fear, or I would feel blocked and reduce my possibilities, end up with a very small life, until I had this awareness moment, and then the process of facing my fear again and again and again. So in my case, I became conscious of the process, and I actively used fear as a compass to know what would be the next step in my growth. So,
Yeah, dude.
First was talking to the neighbor, then going to events, talking to people in the street, talking on stage, doing animations for weddings, in bars, public speaking, giving conferences, networking in 5 stars hotels. So I already did okay, what's the next thing that feels very scary? And to be fair, there were many times on this journey when I felt that, oh, Jeff, why did you have to follow this stupid rule of facing your fears? Oh, no. But it's also what I teach to people who have social fears. Well, face the fear, but do it progressively, of course. You don't do the big stuff right away, but you try to find, okay, so what would be the next step and the next step and the next step? And by using fear as a compass, that's how I could develop many skills, and now feeling that I have so much more possibilities in life that I don't exactly know yet how I'm gonna use them,
Mm-hmm.
but the possibilities are here, and I know that I will not be stopped by something because there is a fear between me and the thing that I want. And it also gives clarity, because when you have a lot of fear, it's hard to say it's fear. It's so
Mm.
much easier to say, yeah, it's just I don't like it. Oh, it's not that I fear speaking in public. I just don't like it. And I don't really have something I would really want to share. It's just, I just don't have it. But if it's fear, you don't know. You don't know. You only know if there is no fear, because then if there is really no fear and you can really jump on stage just by snapping your fingers, and if you have something to say or not, because then you have this clarity. But if fear is here, you don't. And the byproduct that you get by facing fears so many times is an enormous confidence. first it's funny because you don't feel the confidence. You face fears a few times. So of course, you have benefits. You feel great about it, and you feel you're growing. But confidence
Yeah.
takes a little bit more time to do it. Then you need many iterations of doing scary things to start to feel more confident about it. But it's really a journey that is amazing journey. It's really that it changed your life, and I'm so happy to share to take the opportunity to share it, because it's basically what I did in the 4 years. So
I feel it, man. I feel it. My heart is just open. I'll just tell you right now, like, as you were talking, my heart is just like, you know, a side note, So first of all, I just want to say, both of you guys, love your stories, and they're beautiful, man. And they're really beautiful. And I'm happy that we could have similar experiences. Life is so cool. Life is so fucking cool. It's it's the hardest thing in the world, but it's also so satisfying when you play this game. Like, when you really play it, when it doesn't become a game of like dodge and it becomes a game of like, where to next? What mountain now? That's a whole different game. And when that happens, it's just like, instead of it being hell, it's like, this could be the coolest thing ever. Like, what can I do if I'm not going to if I can't, right? If I couldn't do these things, then life sucks. But if I can, if can is on the table, brother, what do I want to do? I feel you, man.
It's incredible. I'm reminded of a lyric that I really love and that I hold deep to my heart from a band called Neck Deep. It's a song called Gold Steps. But it says, I've been moving mountains that I once had to climb. And there are so many things about, our experiences that at one point in time were debilitating, even if we recognize it or not. That now we can talk about and we can source as a place of strength now, and a place of experience. And the reason that Jeff and I started this podcast is because we love people and we think that people are incredible. But we also wanted to give our audience an opportunity to draw on those incredible experiences and draw on those incredible skills, and use that as a form to elevate themselves, right? And so part of what we do is we ask every guest, what's one skill in terms of your background and your experience and kind of your growth? What's one skill that kind of maybe stands amongst the others as kind of a guiding post to get you to where you are today? And what's something that they can practice to make themselves better?
Another great question, man. A great question. One skill. The skill that absolutely changed my life is the one that Jeff is talking about. That absolutely changed my life. And it is, I think your mind will tell you it's so simple, it must be wrong. It's like, it couldn't be as simple as facing your fears, right? Like that's life couldn't be like that, right? It couldn't be that simple. I mean, it isn't that simple, but that's a big piece of it. That's a big piece. And it's like, it's not like I'm like some awesome guy. I'm just a guy, but I'll just tell you, my life's gotten way less bad as I've learned to do that. Right. Like, yeah, I think that's the one. I think it's the skill is facing your fears and all the things involved with that. One of those things is the ability to accept uncertainty and just like actually like sit with that and just feel it versus like try to avoid it. Right. A bunch of decisions I've made a bunch of decisions in my life personally that are based around avoiding uncertainty rather than what would be the best thing to do. But what I realized was eventually is kind of realized uncertainty is the same thing as experiencing life. Like, like uncertainty just means possibility and lack of control, right? Like, and that is just the experience of being in contact with life. You can make your life certain, but then you don't have a life because you're no longer in touch with it anymore, right? So one of those things was just developing the capacity to be able to be in contact with uncertainty all the time, right? And that grows, just like Jeff said, that grows over time. It's hard to see that it grows because one of the reasons why it's so hard to see for me that it grows, and maybe it's the same for other people, because the experience of fear, of deep fear, is just as unsettling every time it hits you, pretty much. And so you have to find that inner strength and find your center once more over and over again. It's a very unsettling thing. The fact that you kind of have to like, sometimes it feels like you're starting from square one. A lot of times over and over and over again, you develop an awareness over time and you develop a strength over time. You're like, oh, wait, I remember where this is. I remember what's going on here. I can press into it. But that feeling, it being that intense and all encompassing and unsettling, like existentially unsettling, that's a huge barrier. So one, it's ability to deal with and sit with the feeling of uncertainty. And two, man, Jeff nailed it out of the park too, man. It's like, and it's so funny. One of my best friends has a saying. It's exactly like the saying Jeff has. Anxiety is a compass. Anxiety is a compass. What you don't necessarily need to do, I don't think, everything that you fear, but you do, I think, need to face, or should, if you want to grow, face everything that you fear. Right. And those things that you fear are the things. All right. I hope we have time for this, because this story is like, oh, it's one of my favorites. Okay. So there's this not very good but very deep movie. It's not a very great movie, but it is a very deep movie. And it's called King Arthur. It's by Guy Ritchie. Guy Ritchie makes some good movies, but King Arthur is a little goof, but it has some profound stuff in it. And one of the most profound things in King Arthur is that King Arthur is like, in the movie, right? He has this like memory that keeps on recurring that he like runs away from. And it's like disempowering him and he doesn't even know it. And so like after one of these instances, he's like wandering around and he runs into this like magical mage lady. And the magical mage lady is like, and I'm paraphrasing, so don't kill me if I get these words wrong. She's basically like, did you do it? And he's like, do what? He's like, did you see what you need to see? And he's like, well, I think so. And she's just like, whatever. It's like, look, she's like, no one wants to look at it. No one wants to look at it. But that's the difference between a man and a king. The king looks. And that to me is like the thing. Like, if you are afraid of something in your life and you want to master your life, look at it.
Yes. Whoa. That's such a powerful advice. But people will hate us for this because then they...
All right,
every time I say to people, yeah, facing fear is like they will hate it. But it's hard, but it's also the thing that brings the meaning and that improves your self-image. And what I like to remind also is that there is no level. If you face the fear, you're brave. And it doesn't matter if it's something that looks impressive for other people or not. This is purely internal. If you're really scared to go to the bakery and order bread and you do it, you're the brave one.
Yeah.
Because when it comes to internal feelings, we can't compare.
Beautiful, dude. Beautiful.
So thank you very much, Alex, for all those pieces of wisdom. And it's not finished because now you have the right to answer our special question that we ask all of our guests.
Give it to me.
It's the magic microphone question. And the magic microphone that I will give you for 2 minutes allow you to speak to everyone on Earth. People who are alive today, but also everyone who's not even born yet. They will have a chance to hear to your universal message. What do you want to tell them?
Brother. Oh my gosh. All right, I'm going to try this. I don't know if it's going to take 2 minutes. I would just say, I want to speak to you guys. That's what I want to speak to. I don't need to speak to everyone in the world. I need to speak to you guys. Thank you guys. I really appreciate the honor of being here and talking to you. I'm honored by your stories. I'm honored by your wisdom and the things that you had to share. They touched me, and I really appreciate that. It seems to me that you guys are motivated by love, and that is the fucking best, man. So thank you, both of you guys. That's all I have to say, but I deeply appreciate you both.
But you know what? That's perfect, because I think, while it was meant for us, I think that's the point of this kind of podcast, right? And it's the point of this kind of conversation, and really that's something that everyone should hear at least once in their life. Is thank you for just being you, sharing your story, and being an incredible benefit to everyone around you.
Yeah.
Alex, thank you so much, man, for being on this podcast. We got real deep, but it's in a way that I think everyone can relate to, and everyone can feel comfortable with. And if they're uncomfortable with it, then that's perfect, because this is exactly what you should be doing, is listening to things that make you uncomfortable. Again, thanks, man.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. So if you made it this far, make sure to like, subscribe, give us 5 stars, send it to a friend. Especially if they're afraid of this kind of topic of conversation. That's kind of the right thing to do here. And thank you guys for listening. We'll catch you next Wednesday, another episode of Casually Pro. Take care. Bye, guys.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.